The newly promoted clubs from League One in the Championship this season haven't exactly had the best welcome to the Championship. We had some very high expectations of at least a couple of these teams coming into the Championship this season, and they haven't had exactly the easiest start going into the Championship this season. So we're going to be taking a look at all three sides and talking about their start to the season and how they're getting on so far. If you're a fan of Charlton, Wrexham and Birmingham, do hit that subscribe button because we do daily Championship content. And if you're a fan of any of those three clubs, we talk about your clubs pretty much every single day. So if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, it only takes 1 second. It'll be very greatly appreciated. And please do drop a like as well. If you do go on to enjoy the video, that'd be very greatly appreciated as well. And let's jump straight into it. With that transfer not working out so far, of course, it's very, very early days and you can't exactly judge Charlie Kelman too much yet. But as I say, his record in the Championship, Charlton spent a lot of money on it. It's £3 million rising to £5 million. He's never actually scored a goal in the Championship. He's played a lot against QPR, so 25 games for QPR now. He's played 5 for Charlton. It's 30 matches in the Championship with no goals. And it's a big transfer fee they've put on him, and they're going to have to hope that ends up working out for them eventually. I think some of the business other than that's actually been pretty good. I think Rob Epter, I do really like him as a player coming in from Blackpool last season. He had a really good season in League One. He's looked decent in the minutes that I've watched him so far. I think he's obviously very quick and he works very hard for the side as well. That's someone obviously in a Nathan Jones system, which is something that's ideal. Of course, we need more goal output from these Charlton players because if you have a look, Charlton have only actually scored 3 goals so far this season. That's where you think, Charlton could be down there come the end of the season just due to the fact that they haven't got enough players or haven't been scoring enough goals so far in the season. Although in games, as I say, I do think they've looked pretty decent in games, to be honest. I mean, even against QPR, I watched obviously that game for the full 90, where they weren't that bad in that game. It was a pretty even game. Could have gone either way at the end. And in League One, in a game like that, Charlton might end up winning a match like that, where a game's kind of in the balance, but eventually the game did just get away from it, which, as I say, maybe in League One, they end up winning that match 2-1 or whatever. In the Championship, you just quite simply don't get that kind of thing. Them kind of things going your way because of just the quality of players and the difference in the Championship and in League One. You look at the game as well against Leicester, where I think they gave a really good account of themselves. They should have scored a goal if it wasn't for the Leicester goalkeeper putting in an amazing performance, and then Leicester individual quality for Tyrell goes and bags a goal. That's just the kind of the way that it is in the Championship. They got a hard-fought 1-0 win against Watford in a last-minute winner. But as I say, it's been frustrating. It's been quite disappointing overall. 5 points in the first 5 games isn't a catastrophe. It isn't bad at all. But as I say, there is a few alarm bells ringing there for me, which, as I say, in terms of the goals scored in defensively, obviously they've been pretty solid. Only 5 goals conceded, and 3 of them coming in one match against QPR. I don't think defensively has really been too much of a problem for them at all. And you know what you're going to get with the Nathan Jones side. They're going to be very hard working and going to be tough to break down, which has been absolutely what Charlton have been so far this season. But as I said, they'll be hoping for a little bit more creativity going forward, and when they do get them chances, they'll be hoping they can maybe take the chances as well when they do get it, because that has definitely failed them in a couple of games. But overall, it's not been a bad start for Charlton. It's not been, as I say, it's not been amazing or anything like that. It's not like it's blown anybody away, but at least they got points on the board, and as I say, they can build on it. And I do back Nathan Jones. As I say, I put Charlton outside of the relegation zone in my predictions for a reason. I do think Nathan Jones will be able to get it right. And as I say, it's not been a dreadful start for Charlton, given the circumstances and given the situation that they're in. Of course, they have spent quite a bit of money as well in the transfer market, but as I say, it's going to be difficult for them this season. I do think they'll be in and around the drop zone, but for me, I still do back them to stay up. Then we've got Wrexham, where, it's an interesting conversation, isn't it, with Wrexham right now, with what's going on with Phil Parkinson. He's actually under serious pressure right now. Of course, his record in the Championship, he's just quite simply never cut it in the Championship. Of course, it's done an unbelievable job to get the back-to-back promotions, but, at the end of the day, it doesn't buy him any more time because of his record in the Championship and the ambition that Wrexham have got. If they didn't have this kind of ambition that they've got, you probably say Phil Parkinson, his job would be pretty safe, but he's genuinely one of the managers that it could be one of the first managers. Of course, we've already had a sack in the season, but he could be one of their managers that could go very, very early on this season if results don't change. I'm already seeing reports of Wrexham apparently looking for new managers. And, it's been a really wild start to the season for Wrexham because, I've seen they've conceded the most shots in the Championship so far this season. But then they've also, I think, created the most chances as well in the Championship this season. So, going forward, it's been a bit of a strange one, really, because, as I say, with Wrexham, we've kind of associated them, especially in League One, with them being very solid at the back, kind of nicking games and winning, and just about winning games and just about getting through games, to win the Championship now, where they're creating a lot of chances by the looks of it, but they're also conceding so many chances the other way, because defensively, obviously I watched that last match that they played against QPR, they were defensively in absolute shambles in that match. As I said, they've conceded the most shots so far in the division. There's a few concerning signs, especially, as I say, defensively. When you look at Connor Cody, he's really struggled so far this season. He looks to have kind of lost his pace, doesn't really have any pace at all, especially it was kind of seen for the goals that QPR scored. And he's a player that's been brought in for a couple of million, obviously got a big reputation, played for England, played in the Premier League for numerous seasons, a lot of seasons in the Premier League, and he's a player that's really, really struggled so far for Wrexham. And Leicester fans were quite happy to see the back of him, and I mean, you can understand that now when you see what's going on with Wrexham and what's going on with Connor Cody. Also, the goalkeeper situation, Okonkwo, obviously Ward was starting. Ward's got an injury now. Okonkwo's come in. In watching that game against QPR, I mean, off the line, he was very, very slow off the line. He was kind of glued to his line, which was definitely a problem in that match. Maybe he needs to be a little bit more positive in terms of his starting position for balls in behind, because people will put balls in behind Wrexham if they are going to be going forward and they're losing a match. You know, when you've got slow players like Connor Cody, you're going to have your keeper who can sweep up sometimes, and Okonkwo quite simply didn't do that in the match. And as I said, they spent a lot of money here. They spent £30 million. It's been well documented. And you look at the players they brought in, Dominic Highen, Ben Sheaf, Callum Doyle. These are all quality players. Nathan Brothers spent a massive, massive transfer fee on him, and it hasn't quite worked out for him so far. I really like Lewis O'Brien in midfield. I still think he offers a lot in that midfield. Really good on the ball, really busy player, good on and off the ball. We saw that in the game against Millwall, especially, where he was really, really impressive. But you look at all them signings that they brought in recently, and that team should not be towards the bottom of the league. Of course, it's difficult, and you've got a lot of players that have come into the side, and you've got to get them all to gel. But there's players in the side where I'm looking at, I'm like, are these players really cut out? I'm looking at like James in midfield, obviously, what is he now, 30 odd years old, 32, 30, 34 even, he's even older than that, 34 years old. He looks a little bit slow in the midfield. Connor Cody looks slow at the back. I mean, James McLean's picked up a couple of assists, but I'm not so sure on James McLean as well. I didn't think he was great in the game against QPR either. And you look at the tactic and the way that they play, it's very much reliant on Kiefer Moore, which, as I say, I mean, if Kiefer Moore's fit and he's going to be playing week in, week out, it's not a bad tactic at all. He's scored 4 goals this season. He's been Wrexham's best player by a clear mile, in my opinion, so far this season. Has really, really impressed in terms of, look like it's 96 aerial duels won. And as I say, for a focal point, for someone that they can knock the ball up to and play that kind of way, he's absolutely perfect. As I said at the time when they signed Kiefer Moore, it was a lot of money, but he's a perfect signing for Phil Parkinson's system and the way that Wrexham probably want to play in the Championship. But as I say, it's a little bit maybe one-dimensional, and in the Championship, our team's going to find you out if they can kind of keep him more quiet. Do they keep Wrexham quiet? It's obviously very difficult to keep a player like him quiet because he's so tall and he can win so many headers. Kiefer Moore can, but if he gets an injury, which is very much possible, you look at them then, like, how are they going to play? How are they going to set up? Are they going to be able to create the chance that they're creating right now with Kiefer Moore in the side? If he's not in the side, I'm not so sure. So there's serious questions over the manager. As I say, with the amount of money that they've spent to be sat 21st in the table, only 4 points picked up. They have obviously scored a lot of goals, but defensively, they've not been good enough defensively. There's some clear problems here. And you look at their next fixture now, up against Norwich away. I think Norwich will be looking at, and Josh Sargent will be looking at this Wrexham defence and thinking, I can maybe get a few goals here. And you just think as every week goes by, it just looks more and more like it feels like it's eventually going to be inevitable that Phil Parkinson does part ways with Wrexham, which, he's been an unbelievable job with 3 promotions in a row. To then be talking about the sack sounds absolutely crazy, but as I said before, this kind of ambition that Wrexham have, it's different. And Phil Parkinson at Championship level, quite simply, at any of his clubs that he's managed, hasn't been cut out for managing in the Championship, and it looks to me maybe a level too high for him. And you can say that so far this season with the way that things have gone for Wrexham. As I say, performances haven't been absolutely terrible. Like QPR was a disaster. Defensively, they were an absolute disaster. Millwall could have very easily scored a goal against them. They definitely created chances, but Wrexham, that was kind of like a League One performance where they were up against it, they were defending, and they ended up getting themselves the win in that match. In the cup competition, they've actually been pretty decent. But then you go back, West Brom wasn't a bad performance. Sheffield Wednesday was not good enough, to be 2-0 up, cruising to bottle that game. And against Southampton, actually gave a good account of themselves again. So they haven't been absolutely diabolical, but the points on the board, the pressures of the situation, you can understand why there's pressure on Phil Parkinson and why people are maybe, you can understand the point where Wrexham might actually end up getting rid of him despite the unbelievable job he's done. But as I say, at Championship level, the stats don't exactly favour Phil Parkinson. Now going to Birmingham City, which the team, as I said, have the highest expectations out of the 3 newly promoted teams. There's been a clear problem with Birmingham City. They started the season very, very well when you look at the results they were getting. And if we just go on the results they were getting here, I mean, right at the start of the season, they were really impressive. They should have got the 3 points against Ipswich. There's no denying that. Really good performance against Sheffield United. Absolutely dominated that game. Were in complete control. Blackburn, two late goals away at them at Blackburn, which shows real character, and a performance against Oxford, where again they were relatively untroubled defensively. Birmingham have actually been really decent this season, and then since then it's just kind of just turned. They've had some difficult games. There's no denying it. There's no point or there's no need to absolutely hit the panic button yet, because obviously people kind of go for Birmingham City straight away with the ownership that they've got, and the League One spending as well. A lot of people kind of have it in for Birmingham in that regard. So people will turn very quickly, and there's a lot more kind of scrutiny on Birmingham compared to a lot of other Championship teams, a lot of other newly promoted teams we've ever seen. So it's easy for people to kind of overreact, jump on things, and make out things are worse than what they are. Very much so with Birmingham, because obviously they are a big talking point in the Championship, especially this season with everything that's going on, the ambitions that they've got. And then you look at it here, results haven't been great. There's no denying it. 3 games in a row, no goals scored, and creativity has been a clear problem even since the start of the season. You could kind of see that even games where Birmingham were having a lot of possession, they weren't exactly creating chances at will and weren't exactly the most free-flowing side. And it's proven the last 3 games where they were up against probably higher quality opposition. Especially in Leicester, who are obviously expected to be up there come the end of the season, who just kind of sat back and let Birmingham play and played on the counter and picked their moments to go forward. And Leicester managed to create a few chances, and when they got their chances, they were clinical enough to take them. That's been another issue with Birmingham. They haven't exactly, when they have got the chances, been the most clinical this season. Things can definitely improve. It's only early days in the season. Of course, Leicester, you can write that one off as kind of, Leicester, a team that got relegated from the Premier League. We expect them to be up there. They've got amazing individual quality. You can write that game off and say, fair enough. Birmingham is still, at the end of the day, a newly promoted team. Then you have the game against Stoke, where, again, Birmingham just didn't really create anything at all, anything of note at all in that game, and Stoke were well-worthy winners in that match. And again, Stoke are another team there that you look at this season, they've actually been really impressive so far this season. The second in the table, 9 goals scored, just the 3 conceded. They've been really good defensively, as well as that really good on the counter-attack. And you kind of felt, I did put in my prediction for that game, that I think Stoke will win, just because I think the way that Birmingham play and the way that Stoke, I think it just kind of suits the way that Stoke want to play, because obviously they're so quick on the counter-attack. When you look at their kind of players that can break, you look at the likes of Sorba Thomas, Manhoof and Mabama as well. With quality pass to the ball in behind, you've got the likes of Lewis Baker, and as well as that, of course, you've got experience in the side as well. They've got a really good team, Stoke have, and I actually do think they will be up there come the end of the season. So again, it's obviously very frustrating not to get the result in that game, but Stoke are a very, very good side, so there's no need to hit the panic button. But as I said, there's clear issues in terms of creativity and in terms of on the ball is a little bit of a problem for Birmingham. I don't think defensively it's been bad at all. As I said, defensively they've actually been very, very solid. Been one of the better sides defensively in the Championship over the course of the opening 5 matches. It's been creativity, and as I say, there's you've got Kyogo there who's they spent big money on. There's no denying that they spent almost 10 million on Kyogo, and he's struggled so far in terms of when he has got the chance, he hasn't really managed to take them. And we're going to need a little bit more from him if Birmingham City are going to be up there come the end of the season. There's no denying that. And in terms of output, we're going to need more from them strikers, because midfielders, goals, they brought in Patrick Roberts, who is historically his goal record isn't exactly the best in terms of actually putting the ball in the back of the net. He's good at providing, but you look at the goals that he's scored in the last 3 seasons now. He's only scored 2 goals and picked up 8 assists in 1 season there. He's more of a creator. He's not an out-and-out goal scorer, someone that can provide a lot of goals from wide. We're going to need more goals. We're going to need goals from demarai Gray. We're going to need more players to chip in terms of that, because you don't want too much pressure on Jay Stansfield and Kyogo, who so far, in terms of his finishing, hasn't really been up to scratch, and he's not really gone too well for Kyogo so far. Hopefully things can turn for him. But as I say, it's still very, very early days. Birmingham next up do play Swansea City, which I think is a good opportunity at 12:30 kickoff to bounce back. And as I say, if they get themselves a win in the next game, you can write off, you got a draw against Ipswich, and fair enough, you lose to Leicester. Stoke have been very good so far this season. So if they are, probably the expectation at this point is maybe to try and get into the playoffs looking at things. And they're still very much not out of any kind of pitch. They're still sat on 7 points after the opening games. They've had a tough run of fixtures at the start of the season, you have to say as well. So there's still a long way to go, and they're still 2 points off the playoffs. So there's absolutely no need to panic. It's still such early days. Of course, there's alarming signs in terms of creating chances, maybe being a little bit slow in possession, and when they get the chances, maybe finishing them chances as well. But as I said, there's still a lot to work, and it's still very early days. But it hasn't been a disastrous start, and it hasn't been a bad start at all, because you look at it after the first 3 games, you'd say Birmingham started the season really, really well, and were very impressive. As I said, there's a few flaws there, but they're going to get ironed out, hopefully, you hope, over the course of the season with some different fixtures, with some better fixtures coming up, especially in that game against Swansea. I think they can potentially get themselves a result. But Swansea, to be fair, sat 7th in the table and they haven't been bad at all so far themselves. So it's been a difficult start. And then after that, they got Coventry after that. Then you got a much better run of fixtures after that. So the next 2 games are going to be interesting. After that, you got Sheffield Wednesday, Wrexham, Hull, Preston. It's a bit of a better run coming up. As I say, Birmingham have had one of the tougher starts in terms of teams they've faced so far in the Championship. So if you're a fan of any of these 3 clubs, let me know on your starts and let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'd be very interested to get your thoughts. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, do drop a like down below. It takes 1 second. It'd be very greatly appreciated. And subscribe as well. As I say, if you're a fan of these clubs, we talk about a lot of your clubs every single day in the Championship. So please do hit that subscribe button. It only takes 1 second and it would mean a lot to me. And I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.